Welcome back to the Refreshing Leadership Podcast with me, Maya Goodker. And on this podcast, we're looking for two things. We're looking for refreshing takes on leadership and personal development. We don't just want the conventional wisdom that you might hear in a leadership classroom. We also want practical ways to refresh our leadership and our self-leadership in both our work and our lives. So today's conversation was a no-brainer for me. It gets underneath something that I know has a huge impact on our performance, our leadership, and our quality of life. Yet it would rarely make its way onto a typical leadership development program. And that is our intimate relationships. Whether you're in a great place in terms of your relationships or things feel harder right now, this is one of those conversations that can build scaffolding, stronger scaffolding in the relationships that matter the most before they reach those stress points. Because, every relationship is going to face ups and downs and challenges and curveballs. And so it would be great if we can strengthen them ahead of that time. Although personal relationships are often treated as something completely separate from work and leadership and career, when we're coaching the whole person. And if we ignore what's happening at home, we often miss the deeper transformation work that is possible and that really allows leaders to thrive. So today I am joined by executive relationship strategist, Katarina Polonska. And we're going to talk about the relationships outside work that shape so much of how we do show up at work. We're going to talk about why high achievers can be particularly vulnerable to relationship breakdown. We're going to talk about some of the deeper emotional drivers behind ambition and overperformance, and why people can end up in relationships, in a marriage or partnership that they no longer recognize. We're even going to talk about the business case for investing in our personal relationships more intentionally. That is not to make them transactional. It's just to give them the weight that they actually deserve. So I invite you to listen in and see what resonates in here for you. So let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome, Katarina, to the podcast. It is great to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's so nice having a podcast with another Brit. That rarely happens with me. Rarely happens. Yeah, so I'm an executive relationship strategist. I work with executives and founders on their relationships, both personal and professional. But really, the bread and butter of my work is working on that personal dynamic. So little attention goes on our personal relationships when we are high performers. I just, as you know, left a breakfast with a lot of very ultra high net worth founders. And it's really fascinating how many of them don't consider their marriage or their intimate life as really relevant to their success. And that's a very, very, very dangerous view to have because, first of all, we know that founders have a 72% divorce rate. CEOs have a higher than average divorce rate. And when you get divorced, for anyone that has been divorced, it's really challenging. It's challenging in every arena of your life. And it absolutely does have an impact on your net worth, on your career, on your company, on your kids. It's not something to be taken lightly. And so I would argue that we need to spend a lot more time and energy learning about relationships and learning how to show up as best as we can to have healthy, fulfilling, nourishing relationships, because really that's how we're going to succeed more and have better results in our lives.
Absolutely. And this is why you caught my attention when I got an email from you. I think two main things. One is that as a coach, as an executive coach, the amount of times that stuff comes up in coaching is really high. So I know it's of importance. I know it's sometimes the thing that is going to be the biggest needle mover in the coaching early on. And so that's one reason. The other reason is that, exactly as you said, when I'm doing group programs, when I'm doing senior executive programs, that stuff comes up, and that stuff seems to be like sort of, like you say, the statistics, they bear up in reality, and you actually see all of that stuff. So we can't, the whole point of refreshing leadership is that there's the traditional wisdom, there's the traditional leadership wisdom, and then there's the stuff that actually makes a real difference, but isn't going to necessarily make it onto a leadership development program, but yet can unlock so much for us. So that's why I really wanted to have this conversation with you. So okay, let's dive in a little bit. So there's one thing that you mentioned, which is the idea that when there is stress going on in that personal relationship, that it can feel like a real invisible tax on performance. Do you want to open that up a little bit and tell us what that might mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I might start with a story about a client I'm working with right now who is a fantastic founder. He's been running his company for about 6 years now. It's valued at, in the hundreds of millions in valuation. And he's brilliant. He's in his late 40s. He's, to me, a young guy who's got kids and a wife. They've been married for about 10 years. And it hasn't been going well. Ever since he had kids with her, the intimacy has begun to fade. Understandably, that's a very common pattern. She is a stay-at-home wife, really tending to the house and tending to the kids as he's out there being the breadwinner. And what's happened in their dynamic is that they've sort of begun to grow apart. The work matters that he wants to come home and talk about because work is really his life. She's not that interested in, because she's not really feeling seen and heard and understood by him, because her life is so different. She's concerned about the butter they're buying and why, the kitchen, the rug in the living room is dirty and how to get the stain out, which fair enough. I mean, these are actually valid things. And he is concerned about, do I invest into this next part of my venture, or what do I do? So there's a tension already at the dinner table where they're kind of butting heads and they're not really interested in each other's discussions anymore. And they're both starting to feel quite lonely in the relationship. Now, imagine you've got kids, you've got busy work schedule, and you don't have the skills and capabilities to actually navigate this very natural tension, what really is a power struggle between a couple that will happen when there's an imbalance in work and responsibility, or when it's different. That does happen. If you don't have the skills to navigate through that, it's going to feel quite scary, right? It's going to feel quite discombobulating. What do I do here? I'm not enjoying this. Dinner doesn't feel good anymore. And so naturally, you might start to shut down. You might start to not share so much with your partner. You might start to turn away from them and find other outlets. So in this guy's case, of course, he's got work colleagues who share the same interests, share the same ambition, starts confiding in them. There happens to be a female, starts to develop a feeling of attraction to her, very understandably. They work late together, they talk a lot. Very understandable, all of this. In the meantime, his wife is feeling more and more unseen, more and more neglected. Tension grows until eventually it starts to bubble over the top, and they start having more conflicts, more arguments. He starts getting closer to this female colleague who's obviously there and empathic and understanding and can relate, because she's got a similar dynamic happening with her partner, and the relationship starts to deteriorate. And what happens at this point is you don't sleep very well. Your stress levels are going up. If you don't sleep very well, then you're not going to perform very well at work the next day. You're going to be preoccupied. Your phone's probably going to be blowing up when you're in a boardroom and your wife is messaging you. These consequences start to happen. And again, very few people are equipped with handling these, right? It's scary. It's uncomfortable. I don't have time for this. Or as one founder said to me, there's no ROI in tackling this because I have no guarantee this is even going to be tackled. It just seems like we keep arguing, we keep misunderstanding each other. So why would I even go there? And so you get out of practice more and more, and the problem compounds because you're now avoiding it. You're in this pattern of avoidance until you're heading towards the divorce. And then you have potentially a year, 2 years of painful mediation and separation and navigating the kids, and a lot of pain. And all of this is, of course, impacting your work. It's impacting your mental health. It's impacting your body and your physiological health. It's impacting your self-esteem. None of it's good. That is the area that I work in, because from my perspective, yes, success is about achieving certain income goals and building legacies of wealth and all of that. Great. But I wanted to expand that definition of success to actually look at our health, our longevity, the quality of our lives. There are so many people who I have worked with who are at that billionaire level of net worth who are miserable, really miserable, because it's such a narrow definition of success. And I'm not here to say that you can't have both. You absolutely can have both, but we need to expand it. And that's really what I'm here for in my work.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm nodding and smiling because I always say, I want to be ambitious about your whole life, not just your work.
Yes.
I want all of that to be great. So I think we're definitely speaking the same language. And I also like the fact that, yes, these are emotional, relational, sometimes seen as softer things, but what you've done there is almost put the business case for it. For those that need to hear it in that language, I can tell who the type of people that you're speaking with that may need to actually hear it in that language before it
Yeah.
maybe sinks in. So yes, of course, in the end, it is not a place that you want to end up being in,
Yeah.
but a little bit like our dear NHS here in the UK, it's something that can be a little bit too late, too little too late, rather than
Yeah.
getting behind the situation from early on. So with that in mind, then I've got a couple of questions. One is, this may or may, some of it's obvious, but what is it about ambitious individuals that might make this more of an issue than average, or the high achiever? What might make them more likely to find themselves having difficulties in this area?
Yeah. We have to look at how high achievers are wired. And I absolutely consider myself a high achiever. And I don't think that high achievement ever necessarily goes away. But I think we develop a different relationship to it when we learn to become more secure within ourselves. So much of that fuel behind ambition, behind high achievement, is coming from a wounded place as opposed to a secure place. And when I say wounded place, what I mean by that is, I'll use myself as an example. Grew up to an immigrant family, lovely family, loved me very much, but didn't have much money growing up, and parents were very busy and very distracted. Both were PhDs, both were trying to make it in the world. So that meant that so much of my childhood was spent alone, was spent either with a nanny or, playing on my own and figuring out my own little childlike life. And then moving countries to England. And in that space, guess what? The wiring that became entrenched in me, because our wiring starts to really form between the ages of 0 and 2, and then kind of 0 and 8, and continues right up to 25. And we continue to rewire as we get older. But really the crux of it happens in that early formative years. For me, the wiring was one of feeling quite alone. And because children have a natural egocentrism where they make everything about themselves as they learn about the world, my interpretation of myself and my role in the world was that I'm alone because there's probably something wrong with me and people don't really want me. And so maybe I'm a bad kid. Maybe I'm not worthy of having love and connection. Maybe I'm not destined to have friends or love. That formed a wound, and that wound, or a number of wounds, and those wounds started to fuel inside of me a desire to prove it wrong, right? A desire to compensate, a desire to get out of my own pain, to get out of my own self-belief of my own identity, which was quite a painful one. And so that fueled inside of me this really high achieving little perfectionist, little, straight A star, gonna be the little good girl dynamic, which, if you think about society, I got really rewarded for. Suddenly, as a little hardworking, high-achieving kid who started getting good grades and even winning at coloring competitions and whatever it was that I was doing, I started to get more praise. I started to get more love. I started to get rewarded by my parents. So, of course, the rule in my subconscious became work hard, get achievements, get validation, get praise, win at life, right? Get status, get power, start to be loved. And so that was really what fueled so much of my ambition. And then later, as a young woman going to a prestigious girls' school, that became coupled with got to be thin as well now, right? So that's kind of a whole separate thing, but got to be thin, got to be aesthetically pleasing to people, have to show up in a very certain way in order to be loved, in order to get praise, because that is what society will reward me for. And that becomes the conditioning of the high performer. The subtext beneath all of this is that I will perform against all odds. I will work hard. I will power through. I will grind. I will override my own needs. I will override any of my own feelings, because the most important thing for me is that I get this done, because my function as a human being is getting things done. When I get things done, I have value in society. I am loved in society and by those people around me. And that becomes the wounded energy behind so much of the ambition. And what that means is that later in life, you become the founder or the CEO who will ignore the fact that you need the bathroom on a call or a boardroom meeting because you just stay and kind of override it. You'll work long hours at night because you're overriding the fact that you're actually really tired. You'll stay in the office late at night and you'll override the fact that you're actually really lonely because you don't have time for loneliness, because you've got to get this thing done for your investors. And so we get really good at performing this role, which is fantastic from a capitalist lens, right? We're very, very good workers. But from a more human being lens, it's full of self-abandonment. And so the journey is to recondition, to quote unquote rewire yourself to overcome these wounded parts of you and actually start having a different relationship with your ambition, where actually your ambition comes from a really secure, full of self-love, healthy place where you genuinely want the best for yourself and you have full confidence and trust that you can get there in a really nourishing and good way. And what I find with all my clients, the final thing I'll say is that when that relationship changes, when those wounds are reconditioned, when you actually rewire yourself to be more secure, you will still get the same wonderful results, if not even better, because you're operating from a much more well-resourced, more empowered place rather than a scarcity, fear-driven, wounded place. Your success actually lies after going through this bit of growth. And it's available to all of us. We all have neuroplasticity. We can all change. We just have to do it.
Wow, you said a lot there. And I'm curious, as people are listening along, which part of that they identify with, because I know 100% from working with my clients that there are parts of what you said that ring absolutely true. Obviously, everyone will have slightly different versions of that or different experiences. It may have been easier or harder, but they will be able to identify with that. I must say, actually, as you did say that, I was thinking I was a high achiever, but it was actually from a place of security. It came from the secure place. So actually, it's quite interesting because you eventually, I guess, you do want to go through that journey and get there if you've come from it from the other side of it. But from where you stand, you think that there is more opportunity once you've crossed over, right? One thing I hear from my friends in private equity is that they will often say everybody in private equity is coming from the place that you described, right? So that's why they're able to work in that environment, which demands so much from you. And that once you almost do the work, because then you get the coaching or you do the other things, once you get in, you suddenly go, what on earth am I doing here? And then you sort of maybe want to walk away from it. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? Our relationship to that high achieving, ambitious state, and how we're coming at it at different stages in our lives as well, and what we see ourselves to be rewarded for externally versus what matters to us internally. I guess the next question is, what does that then, I mean, in some ways it's very obvious again, but I want to hear it in your language because it's so, you put things so crystal clear, is what does this then mean for your marriage or your intimate relationship?
Absolutely. And I just spotted the Whistler poster behind you. Love Whistler.
That's what I mean about your whole Vancouver thing.
I love it. I love it. Oh, you should come up. What it means for your marriage and your personal relationship is you are a shell of your true self. When we are so conditioned to be high performing from a place of self-abandonment, which is really what I did my whole life, we are very good at showing those external metrics of success. We're very good at knowing what works in society. So when I look back at my previous relationships, my previous engagement, it ticked all the boxes of what I believed a relationship should look like, right? Aesthetically, on a kind of checklist level. And we're very good at showing up and playing the role of being a happy partner or a happy family, of being a good mother or a good husband. That doesn't mean that we are actually present within it or that it's actually right for us. Because when we are operating from this place of self-abandonment, we are overriding our needs, where we are just pushing through against all odds, but we are on a deeper level afraid of being vulnerable. Because actually, if we were really vulnerable and if we really let people see us, they would see that so much of our energy and of our performance is actually coming from this like deep fear. This deep fear that I'm not good enough and I'm not lovable and no one wants me and I actually am going to be alone and I'm not worthy. And this very, very vulnerable, tender part of us, this very wounded, childlike part of us that is dominating so much of our energy and our behavior. If we were truly vulnerable and let people see that, it's scary. They could reject us, right? And so we self-abandon that, we push that down and we power ahead and perform the role. But you then get into these relationships where, again, you're performing this role of being happy families, but is it actually right for you? Are you actually with the right person? Does this person actually see and feel and know the real you? Or are you presenting them a manicured version of you? And in my case, a very manicured, vulnerable version of me, right? I was so good at doing the therapy speak. And I had a therapist for 15 years. And I did coaching, I did all this stuff. I was the queen of personal development. but I wasn't actually vulnerable throughout it all. It was a performance still. The performance was, I'm really good at personal development. I work in behavioral science. I know this stuff. I know the language. I follow the Instagram accounts. And so here's my vulnerable life. Here's the truth about me. But there was a much deeper part of me that I still wasn't revealing. I still wasn't bringing to the relationship because I'd abandoned that part so long ago. And so what can happen then is you're in this relationship. You're not really being the real you within it. You're being a function, a performance. You might not even realize that. And slowly but surely over time, that relationship will deteriorate, or you'll both start to live separate lives and live a relationship of avoidance, right? Where you're both kind of doing your own separate thing. You're together, it's functional, it works, it's fine. Not really fulfilled and that happy, but it'll do. It'll do. It's good enough. And you kind of stay in that. But if you are actually trying to get your needs met, the odds are that you're either going to develop feelings for somebody else who actually does begin to know the real you, or you're going to start noticing that, hey, I'm not really feeling fulfilled in this relationship. Something's lacking here, right? There is no intimacy, physical or emotional. And that's when clients often will come to me saying, I've built my life here. I've got this company, I've got the kids, got the house and blah, blah, blah. I'm really not feeling very fulfilled in my marriage. And I actually don't know, now that I've quote unquote made it, if I want this for the next half of my life or third of my life. I don't know if this is actually going to be fulfilling for me. And that's where we have to really look deeper at, well, are you with the right person? And if you are, how do we bridge that gap that has developed between you two? And how do we bring your real self back into that relationship to actually create that more nourishing connection? And that's really the work.
And I like the way that you explain that in, I guess, two phases. So, none of it matters if you're not with the right person, right?
Yeah.
So that has to come first. That exploration has to come first.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that, then you can hopefully take some steps in the right direction. Is there anything there that you can share with us as listener and the listeners around how you go about asking yourselves these questions? I appreciate that this is deep stuff, and that I would love to hear. Where would you point people, as a starting point, as they're walking along, listening to this? What kind of questions might you put out there for them to start thinking about this?
Yeah, great question. It is complex. It's a multifaceted question. The starting point really would be to look at, out of 10, how happy and fulfilled am I in my relationship? Out of 10, right? It's a great little question to start with. And if it's a 6 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10, okay, well, what would you need to bring it up to that 10? And start getting curious. Is it that you need to have better conversations with your partner? Is it that you need your partner to show more desire of you? That's one I hear a lot of. Is it that your partner just doesn't seem very interested in you? Is it that you have nothing in common with your partner anymore? What is it that's going on that you would need to have fulfilled and solved for to bring you up to a 10? And then we have to get onto track of trying to solve for that thing. But the only way we can really solve for that thing is by, first of all, and this is why I do individual work before I do any kind of couples work, if I even do that with the individual, I work with the individuals first, is look at, if you were to assume 100% responsibility for your part in the relationship, where are you showing up in a way that is blocked? Where are you holding yourself back? Where are you perhaps, without realizing it, self-sabotaging in this relationship? And where is that coming from? More often than not, we are self-sabotaging in some shape or form. And it's coming from a subconscious place that we're not even aware of. And that's the place we need to begin with. Because it's all very, well and easy to say, oh, my partner doesn't show any desire in me. Okay, that's the symptom. But how are you showing up? How are you receiving their desire? Are you even able to receive it? Are you even able to recognize it? Or are you, in fact, completely blocked around intimacy yourself, meaning nobody's going to be that fulfilling for you? And that colleague over there doesn't count because you're just in the novel phases of the honeymoon period. That's going to pass too. So we need to really look at what is actually going on within you that may or may not be blocking that desire that you're looking to feel, right? And so much of the work really begins with looking at, where are you blocked on that deeper subconscious level? And where are you actually not able to receive the very things that you want to receive that are holding you back from feeling fulfilled? And then it's about clearing those blocks out. So a lot of my work is around neuroplasticity and helping people, quote unquote, rewire, not a technical term, but rewire their brains. And then it's about getting really clear on, what do you need? What do you need from your partner, right, in order to be happy? a lot of the time people are carrying around a whole backlog of resentment and pain towards their partner that they are carrying. And that resentment, of course, is going to wear away at any intimacy. We need to clear that resentment out. But very often it's difficult to clear that resentment out if you don't know what you need in place of it, and if you don't have any boundaries around it. So there's these kind of different moving pieces, without going too much into my methodology, that we need to go through in order to start reorientating the relationship and your role within it, to discern, am I with the right person? Is it actually even possible for me to feel happy and fulfilled with this person long term? Are they compatible with that? Am I compatible with them? Once I take ownership of my side of the street and clear out any of the resistance and blocks that I might have, and then see things clearly. And from there, I can begin to see, will they step up? Will they meet me here? Or are they actually looking the different direction and not interested at all? Which again, can happen. It absolutely can happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have so many questions from what you just said. The one that I'm going to put in this part of the conversation is what you described, I think, around that 100%, the bit that you have 100% control over, right? Your locus of control within the relationship. I think that's so important. It's such a good thing to get thinking about and brainstorm. I think it also operates best if you also know that your partner is grappling with the same question, right? So there is a sort of, you kind of need both sides of the street, as it were, because there is a tendency, and there, I don't know if there is gender well, I know there is there is definitely a gender thing here, where there is a risk that perhaps the female in the partnership will do the work, do the thinking, do the analysis, have the chats with her friends, because there's more of that going on, and not therefore feel that that's the same amount of effort is happening on the other side. So the fact that you are working with individuals, and then potentially both individuals, and then potentially together, feels like an important part of the way that this actually works.
Absolutely. So much of my work is really about working with the individual first, because couples counseling is great. There's a lot of place for it. And at the same time, it's primarily talk therapy. So you're primarily engaging the conscious mind, which is only 3 to 5% of your brain. You're not actually engaging the deeper subconscious parts. So you can go to couples counseling. You can talk about the problem. You can get advice. You can get strategies and tools and communication practices. And then as soon as you get home, of course, you don't implement them. Of course, you go back into a conflict and the automatic trigger responses come back because you haven't looked at stuff on that deeper level. One of the things that drove me bananas in my first engagement was we did a lot of couples counseling, and it was useful, absolutely, to talk about the problem and kind of build awareness of it. But we never gave solid strategies on what do we do about the fact that he is wired a certain way and behaving a certain way automatically through no fault of his own, and I'm wired a certain way and I'm behaving a certain way. We didn't actually tackle that. And I've done couples counseling so many times, and I've worked with some people who have done couples counseling, and again, I've trained in it. And in the end, it seems to me a very superficial strategy if you haven't stopped to look at, hold on a second, what am I actually bringing to the conversation, and how am I actually showing up, and how am I actually wired? And can I actually start to have a little bit more control over my automatic responses before I even try to kind of take on the more superficial strategies, right? And that's where I really do like to work with individuals first. And more often than not, actually find I don't even need to do the couples work. It's enough to work with the individual.
Fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to bring this part of the conversation to a close, and we're going to have a part 2 conversation where I'll ask you all the other questions that I have.
Perfect.
But thank you so much for sharing this. And I think there will be a lot that people will be able to relate to, or they will have heard things in what you've said that make them think think twice, I guess, about the way that they're maybe going about things, and where they perhaps need to do a little bit deeper reflection and work. So I think that's a great way to kick off. Where can people find you? Do you talk about this in which space? Tell listeners where they can
absolutely
hear more from you.
So if you head over to my website, www.katarinapolonska.com, you'll find a link to my podcast. I talk a lot about it there. I also have a YouTube channel. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn every single day, posting, talking about this material, talking to people. So feel free to DM me there, message me. They're really the best places. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. But really, I'd say go to my podcast if you want to dive into more of this and hear more of the conversation.
And what's the name of your podcast?
The Successfully in Love podcast.
What's it called?
Successfully in Love.
Oh, what a great name. Love it. Love it. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for the first part of this conversation. Thank you for listening today. Awesome. If there's anyone that, as you're listening to this, you think, oh, they really need to hear this conversation, send them a link. It costs nothing and it could have a transformational impact on them. And I look forward to connecting with you all next time. Bye-bye.
Perfect.